Okay, welcome back, everyone. We'd move to the action points from week 3, and I'd suggested that the council could potentially look at any modifications which haven't been superseded by the housing trajectory, and just flag up those as just to save a bit of time in sort of talking through them.
Yes, so we've been through the action list for week 3 and week 4. I have to say, there are a lot that are not covered by the trajectory, but I am going to be as swift as possible through this, because a lot of it is to do with providing details about phasing, etc. So if I am going too fast, then please let me know. In terms of the action list, I've kept to the action list as was circulated. I'm starting off week 3 with action 119. There is an error in the numbering, which Carol is correcting, but I think just for ease of reference between the inspectors and ourselves, we'll continue with that. So action 119 is essentially for us to continuously update the trajectory, which we've done. Moving on to 120, matter 17. This is a modification to consider reference to heritage objectives within the spatial objectives in response to Culvery Green Residents Association. Likewise, on the A21 corridor, again, a modification for us to consider referring to heritage objectives, again, raised by the Culvery Green Residents Association. LCA 02, Lewisham Shopping Centre, a modification. So a modification to paragraph 14.29 that revises the wording to resolve the tension and ensure that what is expected from developers is clearly set out, specifically how the requirements will be applied during the decision taking. I'm sure Carol has got his notes on that. 123 is for the council to reconsider the wording of policy DM3. We've talked about that. I think there's a few actions there. Modification 120, action 124 is updating the net capacity of the site allocation for all uses, particularly the non-residential uses. 125 is providing the inspectors with further details of the phasing of anticipated delivery, and also 126 is essentially how a redevelopment of Lewisham House could factor into the housing trajectory, which we have done. Angela, do you want to provide further clarity on where that is in terms of the trajectory?
So this is in terms of Lewisham Gateway one, isn't it? Yeah, sorry, Lewisham Shopping Centre. Yes, so in terms of that one, we have aligned it with Quad's programme for delivery. That includes the element which is Lewisham House within that, and I believe that is within year 7, so within the 207 block. So depending on which scheme would come forward, this is the scheme which has the maximum amount in it. If Lewisham House come forward separately, then these figures may go down a little bit because they're not proposing as much. Or should I say they're proposing to do co-living housing on their scheme, which then has a pro rata effect on the figures.
Again, that's not necessarily reflected in the updated trajectory we discussed yesterday, I think it was.
Yeah, so the one that we've got in the trajectory is the amount, which would be the scenario where it is brought forward by Landsec.
Just as a general point, are there likely to be many modifications to the trajectory that we discussed on yesterday?
Possibly two. One is in relation to House on the Hill, where we said we would go away and have a look at the capacity due to the trees on the site. And then the other one is in relation to Sainsbury's Belgreen, maybe. For that one, we've kept our capacity figures the same as what it was when we submitted.
Just to clarify, that's Sainsbury's Lee Green, not the Bell Green site.
Oh, hang on then. I might be getting confused there.
I think it would be useful to have any updates to the trajectory fairly soon. So that, just to flag those up as being a priority.
Yes, absolutely. In terms of the House on the Hill and in terms of the Lee Green Sainsbury's, that can be done fairly quickly. I think the difficulty, and just to clarify the position on Lewisham Shopping Centre, is slightly more complicated because we have two parties, each effectively saying that they can't build without the other's permission. One which Landsec, which takes a more comprehensive approach and delivers more housing, and one which takes a less comprehensive approach, albeit a refurbishment option, as similar to Land Securities, which delivers slightly less. We've obviously the legal position has been submitted, and you've suggested that we have a period where we can both ourselves and Lewisham House can respond to that as well.
Yeah, I was in two minds about whether to accept the legal opinion, because I didn't really want to go back and forth on it, but it may actually help to clarify the situation in terms of the quantum and phasing of the development. So.
Okay, I'll move on. 127, that's a modification to move the LUF funding to the supporting text. 128 refers to the factual position that's been overtaken by obviously the legal position and the both our response to that and Lewisham House's response to that. Moving on to land at Conington Road and Lewisham Tesco's, which is 129 has been superseded now with an action further on in terms of, there was an action to clarify the gross versus net floor space in the proposed Tesco's and a stair through the current pre-application process. We will do that. 130 is the superseded action now, which is about the viability of that site, where there's a further action that we'll come on to. 131 is a modification in terms of the terminology of square, which the council will consider. LCA 19, Lawrence House and Civic Centre, a modification that the council agreed to, removing the Lawrence House overflow car park from the tall building suitability zone, figure 5.6, and this was in response to the discussion we had with Calvary Green Residents Association. LCA 20, the South Circular. This is an action point to effectively supply the inspectors with the latest design for the South Circular realignment and a suggested tightening up of the MOL boundary.
I'd see that as more of an urgent matter to resolve.
Okay, thank you. Ravensbourne Retail Park, 134, this was the action to consider the uplift that we had suggested again. I think our position is that we revert back to the lower capacity as that would not be suitable. I think we also had a few actions in there about the building heights. So to be more explicit about 6 stories along the A21 and have that reflected in the tall building figures. LCA 18 Catford Island. The council will continue its efforts to contact the church commissioner. That's action 135, who are the landowners. 136, this was to provide further information on the current position of the Thomas Lane Yard proposal to the examination, which we will do. House on the Hill at Slaithwaite Road is the action that Angela was talking about, 137, which is to confirm the capacity of the site will not adversely be impacted by the trees. Now that may have a slight impact, albeit fairly minor impact on the capacity of that, but we will prioritise that. Action 138, the council will confirm how the site allocation relates to the BLE safeguarding as is referenced in the policy box. My understanding is that there is no formal safeguarding on that site, but we will get back to the inspectors on that one. 139 Lewisham Retail Park. This is about reconsidering the development guidelines to make sure that they're valid for the changed position now that we have new landowners on the site. And 140 is about making sure that the trajectory then reflects that changing position, which it does. Moving on to action 141, which is the Lewisham North area key spatial objectives. Council to consider the Transport for London's representation about incorporating the provision of cycle hire into the North area vision. We will consider that. I'm not sure that that is a strategic spatial objective, but we will consider that and get back to the inspectors on that one. Creative Enterprise Zone, this 142 was for the council to consider policy LNA3 Part D and how the Artworks Creekside suggested the wording could be incorporated to address their concerns. I think this was about unintended consequences of that wording, and certainly the council will have a look at that. 143 was to consider how the Creative Enterprise Zone is shown in figure 8.4, which we can certainly do. Moving on to former Hartsham Works, 144, the council will consider a possible modification to policy LNA 11 to reference the re-provision of a food store on the site. 145 is to amend the name to New Cross Retail Park. Bermondsey Dive Undersite, 146. The council will continue to pursue the completion and the signing of the Statement of Common Ground with Network Rail.
I think that one 146 is on our more urgent list, please.
Great. And also showing a map of their land interest and the interest of the Arch Company as well. Have the long-term lease. 147. The council will consider a further development guideline under LNASA 8 under point 4. May have to look back into Carol's notes on that one, 147. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think this might be related to the transition in uses that we talked about from the residential street, and how there's a natural transition in terms of the industrial uses caused by the site coming forward adjacent to the residential, then the ELSIS, and then the strategic industrial land. I think there was a question about whether that could be reflected in development guidelines more clearly. Action 148 on Evelyn Court. The council will further explore and confirm whether there are any relevant matters that could impact upon viability, specifically whether the provision of affordable housing on site is an issue. We can certainly do that. Surrey Canal Triangle, an action to modify or suggest modifications to the non-residential uses to pick up the Millwall component, which is sort of error currently. 150 is in conjunction with Renewal and Carney Sweeney to provide more information on the phasing of site. 151 is the reference to the bridge. We do know that that is a factual error, and that wording needs to be changed, but we'll suggest a modification. A Sun Wharf, the council to consider any amendments to modification MO115 to reflect the planning status of the site allocation. I think that's just a factual update on where we are with the planning application as it stands. 153 we have done. We've spoken to Bellway and Peabody, and obviously they were present, and quite clear that they still intend to bring the site forward within the 5-year planning, 5-year land supply, so that is reflected in the trajectory. Convoys Wharf to provide the inspectors with a phasing plan. Apollo Business Centre, again, provide the inspectors with anticipated phasing for the build out. 156, a proposed modification that reflects the mixed use of the consented scheme. 157, the council will provide the examination with a brief note that sets out when the temporary waste facility will cease and relocate. Creekside Village East, provide the inspectors with information on the conditions that remain to be discharged. Surrey Canal Road and Trundleys Road, this is one which has been factored into the trajectory. So I think when we were discussing this, we had realised that the Juno Way component of that site allocation hadn't been factored in the trajectory. This is now within the trajectory, obviously for a later time period than the planning application. Frankham Street, LNA SA 160. The council will provide details on completion. So again, we've gone away, and that's reflected in the trajectory. Phase 1 is within the first year.
Yep. So 83 units have been put into year 1 to reflect the units which have been very recently completed but haven't been shown in our completion survey. So that's why it's not actually in 23-24. So it'll be in 24-25, which is year 1.
Action 161 relates to Achilles Street, and that was some additional information on the scheme as it's coming forward. information regarding leaseholders, and information regarding the affordable versus the market split. And just confirming that the local plan policy reflects the most up-to-date planning history position. Moving on to the South Area Principles, Action 162. The Council will consider a modification to policy LSA 1 Part C to take account of the BLE and how development/growth will secure improvements to connectivity to a future station. So this was in relation to the discussion that we had with Belgreen Forum, and just make it more explicit. LSA 3 Belgreen and Lower Sydenham, 163 modifications to policy LSA 3 Part B that relocates references to the provision of a future master plan to the supporting text. 164, again, in relation to comments made by the Belgreen Forum, was to consider a modification to the policy to stress the employment and job creation opportunities across Belgreen and Lower Sydenham. 165, consider a further amendment to modification MO 261 that reflects the new wording being supplied by Transport for London. I think that was raised during that matter. The former Belgreen gas holders, Council will consider amendment to the non-residential floor spaces to reflect the Barrett application and also the Apex scheme coming forward. 167 was providing more information related to the SGN gas pressurisation infrastructure, which we will provide the inspectors in due course. Sainsbury's Belgreen. Again, this is about a modification that makes reference to reprovision of on-site food store and also continuous operation during construction. 169 was just to clarify between ourselves and Sainsbury's the existing floor space of the food store. Stanton Square, this was about considering the phasing of the site allocation and making sure that the housing trajectory responds to that, which has now been done and is within the latest trajectory. 171, modify the site allocation boundary to remove the current western projection. So that's just a small error in the map. Worsley Bridge, 172. This was to provide information on landowners within that site allocation. And then land at Pool Court, there was more information that we were going to supply on the flooding, and more information on the discussions that had been undertaken with the Environment Agency. Anything else that I've missed or any critical?
No, I think it just anything that reflects the amendment of the trajectory, just for that to be done, and any amendments for the trajectory to be done as soon as possible. Okay.
Yes, no problem. And then we move on to week 4. So Action 174, the Council will consider including a more tangible, explicit hook within the key spatial objective, specifically number 9, which talks about the protection and enhancement of views and vistas to the south and west of Sydenham Ridge. And then this also relates back to a previous action to do with the views more specifically and how we deal with those within the design section. 175 Willow Way Elsis, provide the examination with an overall capacity for the Willow Way site. So now that's been reflected in the trajectory. 176, the council will consider its approach to redevelopment of Plot E, specifically in respect of whether it seeks to secure improvement or regeneration of existing provision. In terms of the trajectory, I think we have still considered that site as a redevelopment opportunity. However, I think it's towards the end of the plan period. I'm looking across to Angela to see if that's correct.
Yes, that's correct. So that would be in year 16 for part E of the site.
Action 177.
Sorry, just to interrupt. So the putting that towards the end of the plan period, that was picked up in the trajectory that was applied yesterday. Yeah, that's fine. Sorry.
Action 177 on the Jenner Health Centre, the council to provide the inspectors with an update on the outputs and outcomes of the pre-application discussions with the trust. We have had an initial look at this, and the initial pre-application advice that was sent to the trust raised some concern about the massing that was proposed at the time. So that was for a scheme of 50 units and the reprovision of the non-residential floor space, the health centre. So I think we have erred on the side of caution in terms of the trajectory and kept the trajectory as it is at the moment. Action 178 was for the council to speak to the trust to determine whether there is any timetables in relation to the One Public Estate strategy, which we will certainly do. 179 is about the recent permission of the MOT centre and whether that's been factored into the allocation. The planning application only covers a very small part of the overall site allocation. So whilst it will obviously be factored into the non-residential floor space, we don't think it will make a significant difference. In fact, we're proposing just to keep the trajectory as is in terms of the residential. And then action 180 is for the council to consider the timing delivery across the site, specifically whether multiple land interests will delay delivery until later in the plan period. Angela.
Yes, that's now in there for year 12.
And is that a subsequent update to the trajectory, or was that in the version that we saw yesterday?
That's in the one from for yesterday. Yeah.
Action 181 is on Mansell Road, and that was just for the council to confirm whether the historic employment uses across the site had been considered when considering the quantum of new employment provision on the site in relation to the planning application that's coming forward. 182 land at Forest Hill. This was for the council to consider within the trajectory a phased delivery, which has been considered and was considered and is part of the land trajectory that was considered yesterday. 183 Perryvale Elsis. council to confirm whether the southern part of the site is in a single private ownership or whether there are multiple private ownerships that's still outstanding. And then also to look at the vehicular access to that site. And then 184 was for the council to provide and confirm a timetable for the asset review. There was a few actions on Featherstone Lodge, 185. So the council to provide further information on how vehicular access to the site yes, how the site was accessed as per the previous application. 186, the council will confirm who currently occupies the Featherstone Lodge and what use it is in. Action 187 on 74 to 78 Sydenham Road, the council to consider how it could advance the delivery of the site. May have to look at my Carol's notes on that one to consider.
That is what it says in my notes, word for word.
I think possibly you took us through the site and it seemed to be quite positive in terms of the discussions and possibly planning application, trying to recall. So I think it was just a question of whether it may come forward sooner or not.
The trajectory still shows it towards the end of the plan period. So that might be an action that's still outstanding.
I'd have to check my notes, I think, on that one to see why we thought it could be advanced potentially sooner. If we can maybe all check our notes on that one and see what was said.
Action 188 on Lewisham's East area, spatial objectives and site allocation. The council will confirm whether the site is vacant and establish how long it has been unoccupied.
Was that in relation to whether it was an employment site? And potentially therefore the amount of affordable housing?
Yes, I think this relates to the Mayfield Hospital site, yes. So this is a council-owned site, and I think there was questions about whether it was vacant or not. Yes, I think it was in relation to Mayfield's Hostel, Burnash Hill, SE 07. 189, the council will modify the plan trajectory to split delivery on the site over 2 years in accordance with the latest intelligence. In terms of Mayfield Hostel, I know that it's coming forward just as a single site. So in terms of splitting the delivery over 2 years, we haven't done that in the trajectory. Yes. Okay. Sorry. Yes. So I think it's inaccuracy with the action. The action should not be splitting it over the delivery over 2 years. It's a 2-year build out period, but the site is going to come forward as a single phase. Hopefully that makes sense, and that's reflected in the trajectory. Action 190, Sainsbury's local and west of Grove Park Station, some modification combine into a single requirement, not a guideline, the re-provision of the bus stand on the site. 191, that was information for the council to provide to the inspectors about land ownership. 192 was for the council to confirm the background and details to the referenced artistic colony and confirm whether that reflects the local plan, the adopted local plan. On Sainsbury's Lee Green, there was a question about and a debate about whether the density could be increased from the 190 units per hectare up to an appropriate density within the kind of SLA scale. And I've just noticed that Angela's has wanted to chat, so I'll hand over to her.
Yes, for that one, I have just double checked. And for that one, we did increase the density so that we've now got an additional 45 units on that site. And we've split it between years 14 and 15. So basically the density was generated by increasing it from up to 240 dwellings per hectare. So that was going from an urban to a central setting. So that is included in the trajectory from yesterday.
I think it's important to say that we did consider the participants' representation and the need to deliver the sort of minimum 250. However, when we have applied sensitivities up, for consistency, we feel like it's important that there is a consistent approach across all of them. So where we've put them up, we've only moved it by one band according to the SLA density table, which pushes it from the 190 to 240. Now, of course, through the design-led process, these are indicative capacities, etc. I think we do have to be mindful that there is a grade 2 locally listed building adjacent to the site and is adjacent to a conservation area. So we were, again, being slightly cautious there until we see some actual massing models come through the pre-application process. Action 194 was the council to confirm whether the site is actually in or adjacent to the area of special local character, and we'll get back to the inspectors on that. Likewise, there was a question about the site's flood risk, and we can provide more information on that. As Angela says, 196 was about splitting it to reflect the phased approach, which we have done in the trajectory. 197, again, confirming the identified flood zone and the factual position on any impact that may have on the capacity and deliverability. I mean, just to say we don't envisage any issues there, mainly because the ground floor will be non-residential, but we will definitely check and consider that and come back to the inspectors on that. Action 198 was to provide the inspectors with a copy of the development phasing plan. 199 was to confirm the status of the Leagate statement of common ground. I think we did discuss this at the time. Because it's kind of partnership with the council, this is a statement of common ground that we did not pursue. But what we can do is go back to the relevant officers within the council and the developer just to provide a statement of where we are with that. Matter 15, moving on to housing land supply, action 200. At an appropriate moment, the council will provide the inspectors with the information on the additional site and the potential 450 units uplift during the planned period. I think that will be in fairly short order, because as I understand it, pre-application discussions are going to commence next week, so we can certainly provide that fairly soon. Action 201 was updating a version of the table originally set out under its response 15.3. Which identifies total completions. Action 202, the council will submit its latest version of the authority monitoring report, specifically in reference to delivery rates. Action 203 will provide a separate table that sets out the different sources for the 5-year land supply. So we provided that for the overall trajectory. We'll use the same format for the 5-year land supply, albeit we'll combine it probably into one table. Matter 22, action 205. The council has agreed to rerun the viability assessment on the Connington Road site allocation to ensure that it is consistent. And we've obviously heard that that is a critical action. Action 206, the council will provide the examination with factual information that demonstrates whether the provision of affordable workspace has been raised by developers through the decision-taking process as a matter of viability, and whether it is demonstrably proven to be a barrier to delivery. So my understanding on this was that the inspectors had requested a kind of short note. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think it was just really just drawing on the ground experience in terms of whether the affordable workspace has resulted in any issues of viability. It sounded from the response of Dr. Lee and the council that there wasn't in particular. Maybe it's just one site. So it's just to clarify that, but keep it quite short.
Okay, no problem at all. And is that a critical action?
No.
Action 207, the council and Anthony to agree to prepare a short addendum on land values per area and square meterage. So this was to resolve the issue of the mapping and the tables being easier to understand and more closely aligned.
I think it was just to get a feel for where the lower and higher land values were and how they related to the tables. So I can look at we can look at the individual sites and see which tables they would fall within.
And in terms of timescale for that?
It's not critical, but if that's being, if Dr. Lee's looking at other work that could be wrapped up maybe as part of that, I don't think it's particularly onerous to do so.
I believe it's been actioned, so yeah, should be with you sooner rather than later. And then there was an action 208, again about a discrete note or paper, an addendum that assesses the viability of use class C3 older persons residential accommodation and responding to the comments made by MacArthur and Stone.
I think that's probably urgent as well.
And then 209 is pretty much wrapped up, I think, in that note. So it's about providing comments on lower land values in Lewisham. So that can be accommodated within that addendum or note as per 208, but obviously responding to that particular action point.
I was just picking up the comment by the London Plan examiners in relation to viability of that particular type of development.
And I can round off with matter 23 delivery and monitoring. I have corrected the numbering. Correctly numbered weeks 3 and 4 are with the programme officer already. The numbering I'm about to give you is the corrected numbering. So just as a general rule, everything moves up by 4 actions. So we're not missing 4 actions. Action 214 from matter 23 this morning relates to the IDP, and the council will confirm, will provide information that confirms the costs, the rising costs at the Downham Clinic site, and what the sort of the underlying issue behind the rise from, I think it was quoted, $250,000 to 2.5 million for that scheme.
I think it was it 10 million? Yeah, I think that just the difference between the figure that was quoted initially and what's come in the revision, which is in the appendices for the hearing
I will
statement.
make that adjustment. Thank you. Action 215, also relating to the IDP, the council will, subject to it being available in a timely manner, provide the examination with an updated version of the IDP, obviously depending on when that is. I've put in here October 2024. We will see. Action 216 is a modification, that is to policy DM3. So that is, the council will provide a modification to the supporting text to clarify what meaningful engagement between landowners will be required to satisfy the policy's requirements. Action 217, a modification to policy DM4, the council will consider a modification in sort of parallel to that, to the comments provided by Land Securities at Regulation 19 in respect of the use of compulsory purchase order powers in Land Assembly. Action 218, which is the penultimate action, to policy DM6, the council will consider a modification or modifications that introduce new references to health impact assessments within the same context as planning obligations. My understanding was that that would be within those policies that reference and require such planning obligations across the entirety of the plan, hence reference to more than one modification. And finally, the action as it appears in the action list is vague, but I think it could be expanded quite considerably. It's to policy DM7, most specifically to table 19.1, the KPI table. So the council will comprehensively review the KPI table. The council will split those KPIs within the sort of the plan context, but also I think most critically take account of the advice provided by the inspectors. And I've written here, see notes. I hope my colleagues believe I've given them comprehensive notes on that matter. That's the end of the actions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for taking us through those. I think it was quite useful just to clarify any misunderstandings in terms of the action points, and also just for us to flag up any priorities that we may have. I do appreciate, obviously, that the council's team are going to be taking a well-earned break and having holidays over the summer. And obviously, we flagged up the more urgent items. I wonder whether, as an overarching action point, if it would be worth the council just taking stock of the action list, looking at the actions we flagged up as more urgent, and preparing a more detailed timescale for the preparation of those action points of a realistic timescale, taking account of leave and other, the fact people may be away, or if you're relying on other third parties, for example, and then provide us with that updated list when you get a chance, and then at least we have an idea of timescales of when that information is going to come in. And I think that will also help to feed into an overall timescale for preparing the modifications as well. Because I think we can discuss broad timescales for that, but until we know when those actions are going to come in, it might be quite difficult to.
I'm trying to visualize this in my head with over the overlay of a sort of a calendar timetable. If we were to get something to you early next week, either Monday or Tuesday, would that be acceptable?
That would be really helpful. And as I say, be realistic in terms of those timescales. We need to plan our other work around the timescales as well. So
you can guarantee that will be the case.
Fantastic, thank you. So just in terms of the next stages, if you like, after breathing a very big sigh of relief for having gotten through the examination process, we will be issuing a post-hearings letter which will set out our findings, where there are matters where we've said we'll take a view on. We'll set out our view in the post-hearings letter, and in terms of other sort of more detailed action points, we would just refer to the modification schedule and the action points. And we also set out the how to set out and prepare the modifications and the format in which those would be envisaged. The timing of that post-hearings letter is partly dependent, I think, in terms of when those urgent actions can be provided to us. There are different ways of handling things from our side. We could do an initial post-hearings letter with some points that, we say we're waiting further information on. We'll take a view when that information comes in, or we can hold back till we have all of that information in, and send out a post-hearings letter later, bearing in mind that letter will need to go up to MHCLG. That's correct. So there would be a bit of a time lag with each letter. So just to flag that up. And obviously, I think everybody involved in the examination would like things to move forward as soon as possible. I know from experience things can slow down at the modification stage. So I think it would be good to keep up the momentum that the council's achieved so far, but appreciating that people do have leave planned. Just in terms of our availability, I'm working for the next 2 weeks, but then I'm off for a month. I'm away the last 2 weeks. Dr. Buster's around a little bit more over that time, but obviously just bear in mind that we'll keep Ian in the loop in terms of our availability. But just bear in mind we may not always be available over summer as well. And it sounds as though some of your team would be taking leave over summer. So I think we just have to try and keep moving as fast as we can, and just keep that keep that communication going in terms of where things are at. And I think as long as we're kept in the loop and we know where things are, or we understand why there may be delay, that's fine. But do keep those communication channels kind of open. So obviously we'll need to prepare a consolidated schedule of the potential modifications and main modifications, which have been developing through the hearing sessions, and those set out in the statements of common ground and also in the post hearings letter. The council should also consider the need for any consequential changes that may be required in connection with any main modifications. So any potential minor or additional modifications, or any consequential changes to the policies map. As you'll be aware, we don't have any jurisdiction, I guess, over the policies map, but we do need to make sure that any of the main modifications which result in a consequential change to the policies map are reflected. So just bear that in mind. The schedule of main modification should be in plan order, and any additional modification should be set out in a separate schedule, and we don't get involved in that. And just, I think I've already raised this, but just to avoid an excessive number of main modifications, it's usually best to group all of the changes to a particular policy in one modification. And those should be set out showing any additions as underlined and any deletions as struck through. I'm sure you've all been there before and you know the score. But just to reiterate, as I said, the proposed policy map changes and any additional modifications should be published alongside the main modifications, but are outside of the scope of the examination. The MMs will need to be subject to sustainability appraisal and habitat regulations assessment, insofar as it's necessary, and that should be undertaken by the council prior to consultation and published alongside the main modifications. With regards to any evidence provided by the council at our request, so for example through the action points, the consultation should make clear that interested parties can comment on that evidence where it relates to a representation on a proposed main modification. And just for the avoidance of doubt, advice on main modifications and the essay is included in the Planning Inspectorate's procedure guide for local plan examinations 2021, which I'm sure you can quote. Oh, it's been updated. Yes, it has. Which I'm sure you can quote in your sleep. So yes, just please double check that, which gives useful guidance. We will need to review the schedule of modifications and agree the final version before it's made public for consultation for a period of 6 weeks. just on experience, there will be an element of toing and froing in terms of the main modifications, particularly where we're seeing a new wording, for example, or amended wording. So there will be a little bit of toing and froing on that. If following the main modifications consultation, we consider a further hearing is necessary to discuss matters raised in the representations, we will advise the council at that stage. It's unusual, but it is a possibility. Certainly, we don't anticipate further hearing at this stage. One thing we will need to consider, obviously, is the potential revised NPPF. So we will need to look at both the content of that and whether there are any transitional arrangements arising from that. It will be subject to public consultation, so it may be a while before it's actually in force. But that's a little bit of an unknown quantity. We'll need to take stock on that when it's published, and whether there's a need for additional hearings arising from that. So in terms of timelines, I think we will try and get the post hearings letter out as soon as we can, but again, depending on when the additional information comes in. But certainly it's something we would like to progress as soon as possible. In terms of the main modifications consultation, does the council have a target in mind at the moment, bearing in mind the action points and the proposed modifications? We would think potentially autumn. That's quite broad, but sometime in the autumn. I don't know what the council thinks in terms of pulling together the sort of main modifications schedule, additional modifications to the policies map, taking them through committee, council procedures. I don't know whether the council's given any thought to that at this moment.
Yes, in terms of the procedure, I have to say our process is fairly laborious in terms of timescale, mainly because of the scheduling of mayor and cabinet and then full council, which we will have to go to essentially prior to for approval, essentially to go out to consultation. So, obviously we would think we would be over the moon if we could get through that this year, essentially. Consultation probably late this year, early next year is probably likely. Is more likely than autumn, and that's simply because of the time it takes for us to go through the mayor and cabinet and council process.
Thank you. Yeah, it certainly sounds more realistic in terms of a time scale, and I think if we can try and keep to that as much as possible, if we could all work towards that, that would be really helpful. I think in terms of the housing figures, I think there is some comfort there in terms of the if the adoption does go into the next financial year, I think we have some comfort that we have a 5-year supply and nearly a full requirement. So so it takes the pressure off that a little bit, I think. But do keep us up to date in terms of any movement on that time scale, because we do need to program in our other work as well. Just did the council have any questions regarding the next stages of the process? Any queries, or now is a good time to ask?
Yes, and forgive me for my inexperience of the next steps, but I think it's sort of critical for the council to sort of understand whether or not, and particularly if we're going to hit these timelines, whether or not there could be any delay for additional evidence being prepared and that type of thing, and also considering budget considerations as well. Is that something that is likely to be clear within the post-hearing letter?
I think where there are areas where we require additional evidence, or whether there is something that would delay the timescales, that would be clear in the post-hearings letter. But it's partly dependent, I think, in terms of the information that the council provides us with, and whether we're sort of content with that information, or whether we feel there's a need for additional evidence. So it's difficult to say at the moment, but hopefully not. Hopefully not. Okay, I shall move to closing remarks. Just like to say a few words for the closing of the hearing sessions for the local plan. And firstly, we'd just like to say huge thanks to the council's policy team and also other colleagues supporting from different departments for contributions during the hearing sessions. It has been a very intensive process. We do appreciate that. I think we've covered a lot of ground over 4 weeks, and it has seemed like an endurance test at times, but it has been very productive. And particularly, I'd like to thank the council for the very positive and flexible and adaptable approach, which I think has made a significant difference in terms of helping the plan to move forward. And it is not always the case. I'd just like to say thank you very much for having such a positive attitude and responding to our requests very positively. So thank you very much for that. Secondly, we would like to thank Mr. Ian Kemp over there for all of his support in the run-up to and during the hearing sessions, which have run more or less like clockwork. And also thanks to Kanaya for stepping in week 2 while Ian wasn't here, and for your helpful attitude throughout the hearing sessions. So thank you for that. And also thank you to all of the participants who aren't here, but who have contributed during the course of the hearing sessions, again, in a very positive and constructive way. And there have been some interesting discussions and debates during the hearing sessions. And we have very much enjoyed getting to know this part of the world and working with you all. And I'm sure we can move forward positively with the plan. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Likewise, we want to thank you both for your patience and support through the process, and also putting up with the changeable temperatures within this room, which have been extreme at times. But I'd like to echo your thoughts about the way in which the examination has been conducted, which we feel has been very proactive and positive, and I think is hopefully will lead to a better plan, and particularly with the participants' inputs in again a very positive and constructive manner as well. I hope the inspectors can see that in terms of the plan that we've prepared, we've had some objections, but on the whole, those participating have been supportive of the plan. Maybe minor tweaks here and there, but I think that reflects on the positive nature of the plan and the proactive nature of the council trying to provide a plan for growth and plan for investment within the borough. So very pleased that we have got through the examination and we're moving forward with the process. We would like to keep up the pace. The council's very keen to move forward with the adoption of the plan ASAP and provide that degree of certainty for growth and investment within the borough. And we'll do everything that we can to make sure that you've got the information that you require.
We'll certainly do the best we can from our side, yes, the examination will be continuing in a sense, but I will close the hearing sessions and just like to wish you all a relaxing weekend. Hopefully, I think you all deserve a weekend off. So thank you very much. I shall close the hearing sessions. Thank you.